Good evening, everyone. I know as we close towards the day, you must be really tired, and I'm also going to do a semicircle every time. So bear with me on that. But yes, my name is Ankita, and I'm here to talk about visualization, but in big data, because it seems that today we don't talk about data without using the word big data anymore. But before I start with that, the first question I wanted to ask you was, when do you think visualization actually came into the world? What must be the first absolutely traditional form of visualization? Any guesses? More? Okay, so you're saying symbols, that's a good one. What else? Let's talk about more data. One of the earliest forms was the Battle of Borodino in 1812, when Napoleon got descriptive maps to be made to see how he could capture the small city of Russia. Just to get so many soldiers plotted on terrains to understand how the movement will happen, that's actually started telling us how a picture can tell literally 1,000 words and explain things to people where it might be very difficult to explain in person or just through words. Today, we do a lot of advanced analytics. We are constantly running algorithms, running statistics, come up with these kind of outputs. But do we take these kind of outputs for a presentation? No, we cannot. Because probably the person sitting in front of you, the CEO of your client, will not even understand half of these statistics. So there's no point in me telling them that this is the R, forget about even fancier terms, even this is the R square value. And then we talk about something like big data, where we are collecting a lot more information in a data architecture, in database systems, and then we are talking about actually visually presenting them. So we are today in a world where there is a lot of data around us, but we are confused in terms of how to present and how to actually show it to the person in front of us so that he takes the same meaning out of the data that we want him to take. And remember, that is a very, very important term. The person should be able to take the same meaning out of what I visualize for him as compared to what I want him to take. We are handling so much of data, constantly getting generated across social media, sensors, telephone calls, Twitter handles, Google search engines, everywhere. We are talking about analyzing this data, but even before getting to the analysis stage, more important is understanding the data, understanding the relationships, the patterns in these data before we really move to the next stage. So, this is an open house to you guys. What do you think are some key challenges that analytics people face when they have to present big data or when they have to handle big data? Now forget about presentation also. When they have to handle big data, what do you think are some of the common challenges? Volume. So volume says, I have so much of data, how do I understand? I am from analytics labs where we are training people to get into analytics. Some of the times we give them examples from our own industry background where I tell them, I was working for a client where my client gave me a data set with 5,000 columns. Now 5,000 is relatively small in today's world, but the first thing that the students come back and say is, if someone gives me 5,000 columns, how will I understand it? Because it's absolutely not feasible for me to sit and understand 5,000 columns even within a day. And if I don't understand the 5,000 columns, will it be correct? Will it be fine? And of course, we know the answer is no. Because if you miss out any one variable without knowing which variable you have missed out, you don't know whether it was an important variable or not, and what was the relationship of that variable with the other variables. So the very first challenge, as you correctly said, volume. How do I understand so much of information? What is another challenge that we can think about? Velocity. So quickly data is changing. So how do I constantly keep my analysis updated? How do I constantly keep my reports updated? I'll give you an example from my own experience. I was doing a customer satisfaction survey for a client. Now this client is a global client. There is a customer feedback form that is rolled out every quarter in each and every country. And it's a B2C client, which means on every quarterly basis, we were rolling out almost 800,000 customer feedback forms, collecting the information and analyzing it. Now at the back end, yes, I had a very comprehensive analysis presentation which my team was responsible for generating every quarter once the data was received back. But that entire presentation was a 50-page presentation. For even a team of 10 people to keep reproducing 50 pages again and again and again every quarter was a mammoth task. Every quarter, numbers would change, people would want to see the new stuff, and that actually became a mammoth task. So, velocity. How can I update my analysis quickly each time the data changes? What else? How can I present complex information so that it can be easily understood? Today, my data is not only simple average numbers. We are talking about routes, because there is a lot of logistics and supply chain that has got into our business. We are talking about even geographical information, geographical analysis. How do you present such kind of complicated information for easy to be understood? Traditionally, how would we do it? We would probably make some charts where we will say, okay, Asia, Africa, and so on and so forth. Within Asia, these are the countries, etc. But now, as companies are going global and the data is getting transferred across countries, multinational companies, we are then talking about data getting to one place where the global analysis has to be taken at an overall level, but even at a granular level. So how do I present complex information in an easier way? How do you present highly cardinal data? Do you guys understand data cardinality? Anyone? Okay, so data cardinality means how many unique values exist for a particular column. For example, let's say gender. Gender, very simple, male, female, just 2 unique values. On the other hand, think about bank account numbers. Each bank account number is unique. There are the cardinality of a column like bank account number is really, really high. Can I plot 1 million bank account information on a chart very easily? I cannot. Most of our softwares cannot even accept that. What do we resort to as a result? We start grouping data. We say, instead of looking at each and every bank account number, I will group the data. I will carry out a segmentation, or I will carry out some binning, and I will present the grouped information instead of individual information. Well, that is okay because it helps us in understanding, but we all understand that one of the disadvantages of aggregation is some loss of information. There is always a trade-off that we have to do where we are deciding how much information we are accepting versus while aggregating the data. When I am averaging or I am grouping, there is some volume of information that I am actually losing in that case. So how do you present highly cardinal data is another challenge. Another one is data collected is no longer in your traditional numerical formats. Very simply, can we miss out social media feedback in today? We cannot. Social media feedback, calls coming into the call center, feedback coming to a website, all of this stuff, we cannot miss out anymore. As a result, your traditional charts don't work anymore. So how do you present this data? It is non-traditional, it is non-numeric. Your traditional charts don't work. On top of that, there is a lot of volume of this data also. So with big data, we are basically talking now about unstructured data, which is different varieties of data coming from disparate sources, different data sources, but all needs to be presented in a collective and exhaustive manner. A last one says, I'll go back to the example that I was talking about. Remember that 40, 50 page report? Now imagine I have a team of 10 analysts. They have gone through an extensive week to rerun all the numbers and then recreate the 50-page report. What are some things they always have to take care of when presenting across 50 pages? Formatting should not get broken, because ultimately the presentation has to go to the CEO. The CEO will not like if the colors are not in sync, the chart lines are broken, and so on and so forth. Another major problem that they faced was, I have spent a week in running the entire presentation. I have made a presentation which is looking for the overall world health for the company. But now suddenly my CEO gets up and he says, I don't want to look at the global information. I only want to concentrate on, let's say, Asia. What does that mean? My analysts go back, spend another week, rerun all the numbers, go through all the charts again, and then again present it. And when they do that, now the CEO comes back and says, okay, no longer Asia, let's concentrate on India. Again, the cycle happens. By the time the actual cycle finishes, so much of time has been lost that we don't even know if the information is any longer relevant or not. So these are some of the key challenges that we very popularly see when we are talking about handling big data, and also more specifically talking about presenting it out. It is because of these challenges that today a lot of visualization tools have come into the market. I think some of these have been there for some years, but then some of them are newer to the market. For example, SAP's Business Objects, IBM's Cognos, has been in the market longer than ClickView or Tableau, for example. Microsoft's Power BI is relatively newer to the market. But the one thing that stands for any tool that is up on the screen is it constantly innovating as the data is also changing? If we think about Tableau or Microsoft BI or SAS's Visual Analytics, they are constantly evolving. To be really frank, we actually get to see a new version of the software literally within every 3 to 4 months. Every 3 to 4 months, the software realizes there is something new that can be done which can be helpful to my customers. So constantly these tools have to upgrade and update ourselves because the world is changing, the data that we are handling is changing, and that is making these tools also constantly innovate. Of course, there are positives and negatives for each and every tool. Depending on what is your business context, depending on how much price you want to pay, depending on how many licenses you want to buy, there are positives and negatives to each and every tool, which I'm not going to get into, but we somewhere understand this. The most important tool for us is something that helps us analyze the data visually, very, very quickly. If something is going to take time, if for something I need more IT and technical support, but I am not independent to do this stuff, then I don't want that tool probably. If that tool is going to get me to constantly work with my technical teams and is also going to be expensive for me, I don't want that tool anymore. If the tool, since we are talking about visualization, we are talking about packaging, colors, the kind of chart options that I am talking about. If there is a limitation on that, I don't want that tool. That's one of the reasons why Microsoft Excel and Microsoft PowerPoint are no longer in this list. Because Excel and PowerPoint, even though traditionally they have been the best visualization tools, they have not updated themselves with the newer stuff that is coming in. It's the tools that we see now on the list, which are constantly innovating, even on something as simple as colors. You can never get exhausted of the color options that are there to show so many cities that you want to present on a map. So let's talk about how does the visualization and some of these softwares solve the challenges that we had been talking about. The first one says it should help you comprehend the data easily. Remember, we said information is getting complex day by day. We spoke about city level information. We spoke about networking routes. Can I present networking routes in an Excel chart or a PowerPoint chart? No, I cannot. It does not have any option on that. But today, we have fancier charts which almost any of the visualization tool gives us and which we can choose from. We have the heat maps which can be overlaid on any geographical map to understand how the cities are performing in detail, literally by 1 second look at it. I could not have done this in any other way until and unless I had a heat map overlaid on the geographical map. In fact, today I think after seeing this kind of a map, I can't think of another alternative to this map. The word clouds. Is there anyone who does not understand word cloud, or all of you understand word clouds? Do you understand word clouds? Yep. So, word clouds. Absolutely fantastic way to represent textual data. It's the basicest form, the absolute basic form of representing feedback, but a word clouds is a fantastic way to look at a million comments that might have come back to us, and for the CEO to quickly just understand and look at the cloud and see how it will help. The network routes, as I said, supply chain logistics, your Amazons, eBays, Flipkarts. The network routes, very easily to depict over these maps. So see, these softwares are getting newer and newer chart forms to represent some of the complicated information that we could not think about presenting earlier. We move ahead. Helps comprehend data quickly. We've spoken about time sensitivity. We don't want to lose time when we are updating information. If someone does not want to look at an overall analysis, wants to look at only a certain granularity, wants to change some filtering criterias, let's give him the self-service tool. He doesn't need to know how to write a code. He doesn't need to know how to write a formula also. I will give him a self-service tool by which he can absolutely play around and get to see what he wants to see. Instead of having to wait for the analyst team, or more importantly, the visualization team, to rechurn the numbers and get the newer information back to him. Of course, the good thing when I say self-service tools is, unlike your traditional tools, I, as the analytics person, does not need to spend time in coding. How much time we used to take when we actually had to create a self-service tool like this earlier? Months. I have done that in 2006 and it was a horrible thing. In total, I think we must have written 1,000 lines of code, of which the job was only to pick up data from a flat file, put it across different charts in Excel first, and then from Excel the data would get transported to PowerPoint, and then after that a person was hired to manually go through all the charts to ensure everything was in place and everything was updated. But now I don't need to write even one line of code. The entire interactive dashboards, as what is some of the terms that tools use, it has made that life very easy. As an analytics person, I don't need to write a line of code. As the user of my information, you don't need to know codes. You don't even need to write a formula. You can simply just click on buttons and see the analysis for you. This is something that I picked up from one of the tools that I had shown. It's actually a segmentation which is running where the user is deciding how many segments he wants. So on one of the options on the right side, he feeds in, does he want to see 3 clusters or 4 clusters? When we do segmentation, there is something called a seed number that we feed in. He can actually play around with the seed number also. He can even play around with the list of variables that he wants to take into the segmentation. For all of us who have done a segmentation exercise ever, we know a good robust segmentation depends on the variables that are being fed in. So if I want to iterate that, I just have to tick mark those variables. And automatically you can see the 3 cluster solution and how are the clusters different from each other across different variables. No lines of coding, and forget about the analytics person. My senior, who probably himself does not know analytics but knows how to read the results, can play around with it. Helps update the data and share across the globe very quickly. Another client I worked with had global sales people. So what we had to do, remember this example that I spoke about? Every quarter when I got feedback, I created salesman-wise reports. For each salesman, I had to create a report to show him how his customers had rated that salesman. What were the pain areas of that salesman, of the customers of that salesman, so that that salesperson could go and take care of it. We could do that very easily with this. I've taken an example from Tableau server. Simply connect it to the data source from where the data comes in. We scheduled the information so that every Saturday morning, Saturday, Sunday offices were closed, every Saturday morning the Tableau server would pick up the data from my data generating source. Automatically all charts will get replenished, and simultaneously the mails would be sent to each and every salesperson across the globe so that he could pick up newer reports. Everything happened over the weekend with not a single person available in office. We did not have to worry about any of this thing, and again, I don't think there was any presence of any coding available. The reason why I keep reiterating the fact on the coding is because when we talk about visualization, when we talk about analytics, well, to be really frank, I think for analytics, we are married to codes. If we don't get to write codes, we feel scared and we don't know what we are doing. It's like a black box. But now the best thing is we can actually concentrate our energies elsewhere. For example, instead of trying to figure out of the 2000 lines of code, which line has an error, I can think about how can I make my code more efficient. Or maybe I can try a different analysis form as compared to what I am doing because I have spare time at hand. So that's a reason why these visualization techniques and visualization softwares have become even more popular. Another thing is identifying relationships and patterns with huge volumes of data. If I give you 5,000 columns, what will you do? The first thing is, I think for the first 2 minutes, I will be lost. I won't know where to start from. But then what do we start doing? See, the point is, we all know about the concepts of data dictionaries. There are data dictionaries available with each and every organization, but how descriptive is actually the description of any variable that the organization gives me? Not a lot. Till I actually get into the middle of the data, I will not get to know exactly what that column is doing. So from that perspective, I have to start analyzing so many variables together. Today, softwares have started giving the features of auto charting, show me. As soon as you drop a variable into the software starts suggesting which all charts you want to create or which all charts you should create. For example, if I have dropped a variable related to time, the first thing that the software is going to prompt me to do is create a line chart, because that's the easiest form of looking at a trend across time. So the auto charting, the show me options have become very easy for me to start thinking about how I should use the data without worrying about the fact that I have so much of data to handle. Similarly, I spoke about, no, I do not, similarly, the entire concept of outliers. I have that highly cardinal data. I cannot plot so many millions of data points on a single chart. So how do I identify outliers? Even if I'm talking about 5% outlier presence in my data, with a billion data points, the number of outliers will still be millions. So how do you really understand this? Again, different chart forms that softwares have started giving me. I can very easily visually now see where are the outliers. I don't have to worry about binning, grouping, aggregating, or losing information. And as I said, with all of this thing, analysts can now very importantly spend time on using their brains in understanding the business and seeing how their analysis is going to actually impact the business. Please remember, any visualization story is incomplete till we don't get the concept of story lining into the entire presentation. I cannot just make disparate charts, even though they might be fantastic charts that the software is giving me, but I cannot make disparate charts without telling a powerful story of the analysis that I have done. And each part of the story